What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another adventure here at the Outpost. In today's adventure, we are going to be diving deep into the MCU. Black Widow was just released this weekend, so I thought, what better idea than to rank all of the MCU according to my tastes? That's right, I said my tastes. So there will be a lot of you out there that are MCU-aholics that will not like anything that I rank here because I am not the biggest MCU fan. I do enjoy the movies, but I am not what you would say a die-harder. I don't read a lot of comics, so this is going to be a very upsetting video to some people. But that's on them. Let's dive in and party on. Kicking off this list, rounding us out at the bottom, is a movie that I saw once in theaters and I have never watched it again, and I have zero interest to ever watch it again. I think it's probably most people's bottom of the list, but in case it's not, it should be. And that is The Incredible Hulk. I got this sweet steelbook, though, for it in 4K that I still have yet to ever watch. Maybe one day I'll jump back into this, but I was just never the biggest fan of this. Edward Norton, he was all right as Bruce Banner and the Hulk. It was just, I don't know, it just felt so cookie cutter and pedestrian, and it's just there was just no fun to be had out of this, even with its great collection of characters. I'm glad they brought back William Hurt for the later MCU movies, and now it looks like they're bringing back at least Abomination. I don't know if they're bringing back Tim Roth. Hopefully they do, because Tim Roth is the man. But this is the black sheep of the MCU. Thor: The Dark World is the second film in the Thor franchise, and this was the one where it almost fell completely off the rails. We almost didn't get any more Thor movies after this because this movie it's tough. I mean, I enjoy aspects of it simply because I love Chris Hemsworth and I love Tom Hiddleston. So even though the story aspects don't work so much for me, the character aspects of at least them two are still very consistent and really well done. It's a shame, too, because this seems like one of the movies that got fucked over from too much involvement by the producers, because Alan Taylor, who directed this, did direct some really good Game of Thrones episodes back when Game of Thrones didn't suck. So it's a shame that he wasn't able to translate that over. But this is a tough movie. I can see why Natalie Portman afterwards was just like, I'm not doing any more of those. Like, that's enough of that. This one is a definite misfire in their bunch. Iron Man 2 is the second in the Iron Man series. And this isn't that much of a terrible movie. I think going forward, the rest of these movies, none of them are really that terrible. It's just that some of them just aren't as good as the other ones, and they're very cookie cutter. So they end up towards the bottom of the list. And this is definitely one of them. It's a shame that, again, it seems that like producer interference and meddling over tone kind of screwed the pooch with this one, because Jon Favreau is a time and tested incredible director and writer, and it's a wonder that this one didn't reach up to par with him and some of his other movies. Screenplay by Justin Theroux, who is actually a pretty decently named actor out there. It wasn't until this movie came out that I even knew that he wrote movies. I mean, it's not terrible. It's still got some really cool scenes in it. I mean, obviously we got the introduction of Black Widow here, and then some of the action scenes are pretty cool. The whole ending at the Stark Expo is pretty cool. Justin Hammer is a pretty good pro in this movie. It's a shame that Whiplash didn't get the same treatment, but all in all, when Marvel was finding its legs still, this was not the worst movie to come out. Thor is the first film in the series that came out during Marvel's Phase 1, and I actually really enjoy this movie. It's silly, it's very Shakespearean, very over the top. I enjoyed that a lot. We got the introduction of Hawkeye in here. Thor's fish out of water shtick gets a lot of mileage out of it for me. Like the scene when he's in the town and he's looking for a steed at the pet shop. Like there's a lot of really good bits with that I think really help sell this movie. We also got an introduction to Loki, Tom Hiddleston, who would become a huge, huge part of the MCU moving forward. Loki's about to finish its final episode of its TV show this upcoming Wednesday, and it is one of the best shows on TV. So if for no other reason than what this movie eventually gave way to, earns this spot here. Avengers: Age of Ultron, the movie that broke the scumbag Joss Whedon. This movie it's not terrible. There's a lot of things about it that I really enjoy, and then there's a lot of really stupid shit in it. But it's still a really fun movie to be had, even with like a lot of the influence from the execs, where like you had to shoehorn shit in, like Thor's bath time journey. But it doesn't detract from the good stuff in this movie. Like the whole ending in Sokovia is balls to the walls, fun and energetic and crazy. I love the opening party where they're all just hanging out, and you get like a lot of fun character interactions between them. It's little things like that, character moments, that really sell movies for me, because I much prefer character moments that elevate story than just having, crazy action that elevates story. So this one had a lot of really good moments for me in that regard. Captain Marvel is probably one of the most cookie cutter MCU movies. By this point in time, this was a movie that Marvel can do in their sleep. So what kind of detracts from it is just the fact that it feels very been there, done that origin stories. So like it wasn't that much fun, because it felt like very all the stuff that we had seen already. Like I had seen every ingredient of this movie in every other MCU movie that had came out at that point, and especially since this was like the bridge between the Avengers movies, that was something that shouldn't have happened at that point. Like they should be much more clever and energetic and much more inventive than that, especially when you look at like the history of the comics that they all have. Like granted, I haven't read a lot of the comics, but there is some batshit crazy stuff in the comics from what I've seen, and any number of those things would be better served to tell an origin story than just recycling the same story beats that they have. Like just because it's an award-winning measure doesn't mean you should keep doing it after time after time after time. Like you have to be inventive, you have to change the game, you have to keep us on your toes, or we're gonna get bored. And this was one of those movies that I just ended up getting bored by. And it's a shame, because there's a lot of good stuff in here. Like I think Brie Larson is solid as Captain Marvel. The idea of seeing Nick Fury like back in the 90s is a really good idea. The Skrull plotline, all that stuff is really cool. It's just such a shame that the story beats are just so by the numbers. The first Ant-Man movie is actually a shitload of fun. It was an ingenious idea to get Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. Whoever was the one who came up with that casting, you should give that guy or girl a bonus, because they knocked it out of the fucking park with that one. He is such a good choice to play this character. This movie is a lot of fun. Everyone in it too. They got like the perfect cast for this type of movie, where it's very much just a like shut your brain off, enjoy, silly type of movie. And I like that they get silly. Like the whole idea about like this guy that can just shrink down to an ant, and he like rides an ant around. Like it's everything about it really hits for me. It's very funny. You got Michael Douglas. Like Michael Douglas is a fucking legend. So getting him in there is amazing. The biggest thing that detracts from this one is just its villain problem. The MCU has a very bad track record with its villains, and they're very hit or miss. And this is one of those ones where it's a miss, and that's the only thing that keeps it from being higher up on this list. Though I do love the ending fight scene where they fight in his daughter's apartment, and they're shrinking down all around and using the terrain and everything around them to very good comedic effect. That was really ingenious stuff. The one that started it all. It's crazy to think how far we've come since this movie came out. I remember seeing this in theaters and not even really being that excited for it. I mean, one of my friends was a huge comic fan, so he was like, "We got to go see this. We got to go see this." And you know me, I'll watch any movie that comes out. So we went and saw it, and it was really good. And obviously, I wasn't surprised once I saw that Jon Favreau was the director of this, because that guy, fucking everything he touches is gold. So this movie is a lot of fun. The only thing that keeps it this low is simply just because a lot of the stuff that comes after it is just so balls to the walls, crazy, energetic storylines, that it just makes this one seem almost childish and tame compared to the other ones. It's very simple, which isn't a bad thing. That's why it's kind of like in the middle of the road here. I like this movie a lot. It was a lot of fun. You got Jeff Bridges, which is always a fucking plus. Black Panther is probably one of the biggest MCU movies they've ever put out, simply just because of like it just took on a whole nother life when it came out. It was an absolute gargantuan hit. People from all over the world. This movie influenced so many young people, and it's definitely deserving. It Chadwick Boseman, um, may he rest in peace, was a freaking legend. Even for his young age, like this cast is fucking stacked. Look at everybody on there. You have Michael B. Jordan, Daniel Kaluuya. I forget some of the other Lupita Nyong'o, I know, and then I forget the other two girls' names. They're somewhere on here, but I can't take the time to look. But this is it's a solid movie. I wasn't the biggest fan of this movie simply because if you take away all the other outside world stuff of everything it did for young kids seeing a hero in them and all that stuff, which is all absolutely valid, all great reasons, everything good. But if you strip all that away and just look at it in a story structure, it's very much like Captain Marvel, where it is very cookie cutter. It is stuff that I've seen before. It just felt very by the numbers, and there's some really shoddy CGI in it. And for a company as big as Disney, and especially Marvel, where they have all the money in the world, there's absolutely no excuse for shitty CGI. But the performances in it are great. Everyone is bringing their A game. What really sells the movie for me is Michael B. Jordan's villain. This is one of those ones where they absolutely fucking nailed the villain. And that's what makes this movie worth watching for me, is simply to see his journey in the villain and how he plays against that, because that is easily the highlight of this movie. Iron Man 3 is probably the first controversial placing here that might send people up a wire. The fact that I like Iron Man 3 better than the other Iron Mans, or even the fact that Iron Man 3 is even up this high for some people. But I really enjoy this movie, and I know absolutely why, and it's because it is made by Shane Black. For people that don't know who Shane Black is, he did the Lethal Weapon movies, and he is the fucking king of action comedy. And this one is a really fun action movie, action comedy, which is pretty much what the MCU movies are. They're the new form of action comedy. They knock it out of the park with them, and they know exactly what they're doing. So getting a guy like Shane Black to do this movie is an inspired choice. I'm also going to reiterate. I'm going to reiterate it right now for people that weren't listening before. I don't read a lot of comics, so I do not give a shit when they change stuff from the comics, as long as it makes sense in the movie, in the storyline that they are telling. I don't give a fuck what you change from the comics. So that's why this one hits the mark for me. The fact that whatever the guy is, the leader of the Ten Rings, the Mandarin, that's his fucking name. The fact that the Mandarin was just like some fake drunk actor playing a part is a fucking great twist in this movie to play off of it. Ant-Man and the Wasp continues the Ant-Man's trajectory of just being fun action comedy superhero movies that you can just turn your brain off and enjoy, which is pretty much what I expect from these movies. That's all I want. I just want to sit back and be entertained. I don't expect any award-winning material really in these movies. I just expect fun. And that's what these are. These are like the modern day serials that like you would have watched back in like the 30s and 40s, where it's very much the adventure of the week shit, like that, like Indiana Jones was based on and stuff. That's what these are. These feel like that modern day iteration of them. And Ant-Man and the Wasp is definitely one of the better ones. It's a lot of fun. Paul Rudd is great in it. Evangeline Lilly is great in it. Everyone brings the heat. Lawrence Fishburne, just everyone in it. It's a lot of fun. It does have an issue with a villain problem again. Ghost is like kind of just like it's all right. Doctor Strange is definitely one of the weirdest MCU movies released, and I'm fucking here for it. I've been wanting Marvel to really get weird with their shit for the longest time, and this was a good step in that direction. A lot of the scenes and the way that they use the magic and all the like different like dimensions of the way they're able to use that magic is very fucking weird and crazy, and it's super awesome. I also love the final battle in this movie. I was super glad that it wasn't just like the normal fucking action sequence. Like it was him bargaining with that like crazy ass Dormammu guy. So it was different, and I like when they do different shit. This was a one that, even though it still kept to the same MCU story beats that they do with their origin movies, this one wasn't as offensive as the other ones because it got weird, because it used what we knew of it to turn it on its head and create like the same story beats in different and unique ways. And that's what you got to do to keep this shit fresh, because this one, if you strip away all that weird shit and everything, is basically just like every other Marvel movie in its story structure. But the fact that they let this movie get weird and they really like branch open the reality of the MCU makes this one feel a lot easier to stomach than some of the other ones. Far From Home is a really fun Spider-Man movie. It ranks this high because you got Jake Gyllenhaal in there, rocking as Mysterio. It was super fun, and I'm a person that the only comics I've ever actually really read were the Spider-Man ones, and I was totally fine with a lot of the changes that they brought to Mysterio and the way that they used them in this movie because, like I said, in the context of this movie, everything he did makes sense for that character. So I don't give a shit how he was in the comics or what they changed, simply because what was shown here in this movie and the story beats worked and made sense. And that's all that matters. Tom Holland continues to be a really good fucking Peter Parker in Spider-Man. He is so great in this. Leagues better than Andrew Garfield ever was. I'm sorry to all you Andrew Garfield supporters, but he was not a good Peter Parker. As for the story, it's fine. It's a fun, solid Spider-Man movie that really gets elevated up to this level simply because of the relationship between Mysterio and Spider-Man and the way that he plays it off as a mentor to Robert Downey Jr. in the wake of Spider-Man losing his mentor. That's a really fun story to play with, and that really helped me enjoy this movie a lot. The last remaining MCU Phase 1 movie that we have yet to touch on is Captain America: The First Avenger. This movie is just pure fucking fun. Like I said before, that these are like the modern day serials. This movie is probably the most like those old adventure serials than any other movie that they've released. Like it just feels so quintessentially like 80s and old school. It's just so much fun, and that probably definitely helps that they got Joe Johnston in the director's chair because he directed like a lot of like fun 80s movies like that. So this movie really fires on all cylinders. All the Captain America is probably the one superhero movie that or franchise I should say, that they've never done wrong by. Like they just from the get go, they knew exactly how they wanted to present this guy, what they wanted to do with him, and it works on every level. This movie works. It is so much fun. Hugo Weaving as Red Skull is really good. Sharon Carter, freaking great. Agent Carter. Peggy Carter is what it is. Sharon Carter is the younger one. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Kicking off the top 10 is probably a movie that is going to drive MCU fans up the wall, and that is their newest movie, Black Widow. I really liked this movie. I see why a lot of MCU people don't like this movie is because it probably doesn't contain a lot of the bigger picture of MCU. And for me, it was very refreshing to not have to worry about any of that. Like, all you really needed to know was that it took place in the aftermath of Civil War, so she is on the run. It's all we need. I don't need any other connection to anything else. I mean, you got like a Hawkeye tease in there, but that was really all it needed. I love that this was a very refreshing, old school spy story. It was just a lot of fun for me. Florence Pugh and David Harbour especially are really freaking good in it. Even Rachel Weisz, even though she's a little underutilized, still makes the most of her time. This was a fun movie and definitely a very good MCU movie to put out. It definitely had some moments that were cookie cutter and by the number, but when a movie is very entertaining, it's a little bit easier to stomach it. And this movie had some really kinetic and good action scenes in it. The only thing I didn't like so much about the movie was the scene where they're breaking David Harbour out of prison, mostly because their plan is absolutely fucking stupid. Uh, but other than that, everything about this movie was really good to me. It is a good send-off for Scarlett Johansson in that she got her own solo story. It was a movie about her reconnecting with the only other family she ever had besides the Avengers, and pretty much taking care of the one thing from the past that she needed to really like let herself be at peace. And that helps add to her reasonings of letting go at the end and sacrificing her life, because you see just how much an important family is in her eyes and the people that are there for her. So that was really good for me. And the end credit scene, I won't give any spoilers away, but it will help set it going forward what we're going to do with the other Black Widows now who show up. I'm super excited for the future of what that's going to bring. Give me more Florence Pugh any day of the week. I want her in everything. I love her, and she made this movie fantastic. Scarlett Johansson made this movie fantastic. This was a really fun MCU movie, and it was the perfect movie for MCU to kick off bringing people back into the theaters before they start to get fucking weird going forward with Shang-Chi and the Eternals. and fucking mysterious as hell Spider-Man movie that's coming out, it is going to be a very interesting rest of the year for the MCU. Number 9 is the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. This movie is just a shitload of fun. And this was the movie that pretty much sealed the deal that Marvel can do whatever the fuck they want and people are going to buy tickets for it and we're going to fucking watch it. Like, I would have just loved to have been a fly on the wall in their meeting when they're like, all right, like, we got Captain America, we did Thor, Iron Man, we got Black Widow in there, Hawkeye, the whole team's set up. Like, what else? What other characters can we bring in? And then somebody just ripping a line of Coke in the back of the room was just like, I got it. A fucking talking raccoon and a tree that only says its own fucking name. And somebody was just like, fucking genius, let's do it. But seriously, James Gunn was the perfect person to bring these movies to life because he has such a fun sensibility with ensembles and with making weird, quirky characters work. This movie is really good. The only thing keeping it back is, again, MCU's age-old problem that their villains are very one-note and kind of suck. And this one is no different, as Ronan the Accuser is very fucking one-note in this movie. But other than that, everything about this movie is phenomenal. They gave us Dave Bautista, the actor, baby. This movie will always live on in infamy for giving us Dave Bautista. Thank you, Marvel, for making Dave Bautista a thing. The first Spider-Man movie is a shitload of fun. This is my favorite Spider-Man movie next to the Tobey Maguire ones, even 3. I fucking love those movies. But outside of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans, this is my favorite Spider-Man. It is a lot of fun. Tom Holland is really freaking good. I know I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. And I also love that they had like scenes in the beginning where he's just being like a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Like they did the comics so well in this movie. And even though they changed shit, which again, I don't care about, it still felt like such a good love letter to the comics and to this character. I had a lot of fun with this movie. Michael Keaton as the Vulture is fucking phenomenal. And I love when a movie can surprise me, because even me, I got so invested in this movie that I wasn't even thinking critically and story beats, trying to like figure out the story beforehand, that I didn't even see it coming that Michael Keaton would be the father of the girl that Peter Parker is interested in. So that was a great fucking what the fuck moment that helped make this movie like really entertaining. It is so great, and I am so excited for the next Spider-Man movie, simply because if even one of the rumors of the new Spider-Man movie is true, it's going to be the most batshit MCU movie ever released. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is perfect. It's so freaking good. All right, well, it might not be perfect. That might be stretching it. But this is freaking such a good freaking movie. Bringing Kurt Russell into the fold here was an ingenious idea. Just peeling back the layers of Star-Lord's character and Rocket, and really going through those bonds of family and all that. It was such a very good theme to bring into this movie. Bringing Yondu into that as well. Everything about this movie really worked for me. I guess like the one nitpick you can give about it is that they kind of made Drax into like just the goofy side character, which is a bit of a shame, especially now that we saw how Endgame ended and Thanos is destroyed and Drax never got to be the one to end Thanos for a massacre of his family, which is a bit of a shame. But small nitpicks. Like, I get why they did it. He was such a good comedic presence in the first one. It would only make sense for them to lean into that going forward. So it's a small little thing. Especially Dave Bautista is so good with it. He makes anything work. So it's a very small nitpick. Zoe Saldana continues to be the glue that holds every massive franchise together. She is one of the most incredible actresses of our time. She's so good in everything. I'm so glad that she's in these. She's in Avatar. She's in Star Trek. What franchise hasn't she been a part of? She was in the first Pirates movie. Like, for fuck's sake, this girl is the franchise ambassador. Captain America Strikes Again with the Winter Soldier. This is a really awesome spy movie. And I love spy movies like 3 Days of the Condor, Red Sparrow, all those old or even new spy movies. I just love that type of genre. So for them to take Captain America, who is the all-around poster boy for America, and put him into this like Cold War style espionage movie was a ingenious idea. Whoever came up with that, give that guy a bonus because they deserve it. This movie is freaking great. Captain America is great in it. The Winter Soldier, especially, is really awesome. Bucky Barnes, he's the man. Scarlett Johansson, everyone that they bring into this movie, it just works, fits so well. This is a really fun movie, and it is definitely one of Captain America's best outings. Thor Ragnarok. It's the movie that saved Thor. This man is going to live on for many more years to come in the MCU simply because they revitalized his character in this film. And it's such a funny movie. This movie is so much fun and is exactly what you want, like, Space Thor adventures to be like. Like, it should just be weird and quirky and adventurous and over the top fun. And that's exactly what this is. Taika Waititi nailed this movie on it, the fucking head. He was the best person to bring in to do this. And he filled it with a cast of colorful characters that also help make this movie quirky. Like Jeff Goldblum, the best person you could ever bring into this movie. Like, that was such an ingenious move. Cate Blanchett, I fucking love Cate Blanchett. So getting her into this movie playing the villain was another epic choice. Even if she kind of falls flat and feels a little one note at times, the rest of this movie is just so much fun that you don't even care. The team up that started it all, the Avengers. This movie is so much fun. It was such a quintessential movie, especially when it came out. I remember seeing this in theaters when I was living in the city, in film school, and it was just the funnest time I had had in theaters in a long time. Going to see it with a bunch of my other like film buddies, and we just loved the shit out of this movie. It's so much fun. All the characters just hit their marks perfectly. They all work so well together. Loki as the villain is an inspired choice, and the last 30 minutes of this movie are just balls to the walls crazy. Like, that whole showdown in New York City against an alien race while they're coming out of like that black hole is just, it's so wild. It was the moment where you realize that, like, all right, like, the MCU is gonna get fucking crazy. Like, we've introduced aliens into this world now with the superheroes. Like, there is no telling where else we're gonna go with this. My favorite Captain America movie drops in at number 3, and that is Civil War. This movie is phenomenal. If only for the core story that it's telling between Captain America, Iron Man, and Bucky. It is storytelling perfection. It's so good. It's such a great way to turn itself on itself. It makes Baron Zemo such a good fucking villain. The end of this movie is just phenomenal. How it all just builds up to the three-way showdown between Captain America, Bucky, and Iron Man is just so good. It reminds me of another one of my favorite movies, Dead Man's Chest, which also leads up to an amazing three-way fight between Jack Sparrow, Commodore Norrington, and Will Turner. Just the way that this movie uses the breadcrumb trails to like lead them on a collision course with each other is so good. It's so much fun. It's not as insane as the actual comic Civil War, but when you read that comic and then see like where they were at that point in time for the MCU, there was no way they were going to make the Civil War like it is in the comics. It just wasn't going to happen. And if you were expecting it, then you're very narrow-minded, to call you guys out. But this is a really good movie that helps use that Civil War term, and it works perfectly within the context of this movie. And again, that's all I care about. I don't give a shit what you change from the comics, as long as it makes sense in the context of the movie, and it absolutely did. So it absolutely works here. Avengers Infinity War was the start of the culmination of the journey so far in the MCU, and this is a movie that it's amazing that this movie works as well as it does, because there is so many moving parts and there are so many threads to peel at, and there are so many characters that this movie could have easily fallen in on itself. But under the masterful direction of the Russo brothers, this movie knocks it out of the fucking park, and it is an absolute adventure. It is so much fun. It was a great summer blockbuster movie. It was a great culmination of this journey, of these characters, of this story, and it is an absolute triumph in cinematic universe entertainment. Like, this movie is really good. Um, I don't think it should have like there's a big call for people saying that these movies should be nominated for Oscars. And while I agree that a movie like this should have been nominated for Best Picture simply because it's just too big and too good and too larger than life not to be, still don't think it should win Best Picture. But it should be nominated. This movie should be an Oscar nominated movie in Best Picture. I will give you that because it really is just on a whole nother level. There was nothing like it before this. I don't know if we'll ever get anything like this again. This was such a one of a kind, unique movie, and it was only the first part. But there can only be one, and it should surprise nobody that that number one is Avengers Endgame. And it had to be. This movie, much like Infinity War, is the second piece of that puzzle. But this movie is just insane, is the only way I can describe it. It was a movie that I have been waiting for through all of these cookie cutter Marvel movies to finally hit, and that is to just get fucking weird. And that's what I want out of my superhero movies. Be like the be you don't have to take the actual stories from the comics, but be like the comics and get fucking weird. It's why I love this. It's why I love the Loki TV show. It's why I love WandaVision, because I like those ones that use original ideas to create these absolutely bonkers, batshit adventures. And this one tops the absolute list. The fact that the story is that they decide to figure out how to make time travel work so they can go back in time, get the Infinity Stones before Thanos, and unfuck everything up. That is the most batshit crazy idea I've ever heard in my life. And it's awesome. It works. The whole middle part of that movie where they do the time heist is so much fun. It's such a great adventure. It's such a great usage to reflect back on everything that's come before this movie and tie it all in together with itself. It's just ingenious storytelling. And the whole ending fight at the Avengers compound is fucking incredible. This movie is an absolute powerhouse. This is another one like Infinity War that definitely should have at least been nominated for Best Picture because, like, there's never been a movie like this. And much like Infinity War, I don't know if there'll ever be a movie like this again. And that's my list. Obviously, I watch these movies on a very different playing field than I think most people watch them, especially the MCU diehards. I really do like the MCU. I might make jokes here and there and shit on it and pieces like that. But I do really like this universe. I think they're the only ones that really know how to make a cinematic universe work. I think everybody else should just stop trying because you're never going to get to the level that they did. You just simply don't have the ability. I'm sorry, DCEU, Monster Universe, any other fucking universe that's trying to be made right now, Harry Potter universe. The Harry Potter movies are amazing. Fantastic Beasts movies are not. Get your shit together. None of you can be like Marvel. It's just not possible. It's not going to happen. This was a fucking just much like Thanos' snap, it is just such a one-of-a-kind thing that I don't think can ever be emulated or copied or repeated to the same way that they have made it work. Having said that, though, many of the movies are very cookie-cutter to me. A lot of these movies I've only seen once or twice, and I probably won't watch them again. Most of the ones in the top 10 I've seen a few times, and I will probably continue to go back to every now and again simply because they're a lot of fun and they get very fucking weird. So I do like the MCU. I don't want people to get the wrong impression that just because I've shit on a bunch of these and I've been making jokes throughout this that I don't actually really enjoy this universe. I do. It's a lot of fun. I just simply am not the biggest superhero fan. But as far as fun blockbuster entertainment goes, this is definitely at the top of the pile. So that's all I got in that regard. Let me know down below what your rankings of your MCU movies are. If you think my rankings are absolute dog shit, which I'm sure plenty of you probably will. Let me know what you're excited for going forward in the MCU. I am very much excited for the Spider-Man movie simply because it looks like it's going to get really fucking weird. And then I'm not really excited for too much else. Like Shang-Chi looks cool. But, you know, I mean, I'm more excited just because it looks like a dope kung fu movie and not so much that it's a superhero movie. Eternals, I couldn't care less about, but that's simply because The trailer doesn't look that good, and there's not really like, besides like the huge cast that's in it, there's really nothing else that's like that they're trying to use to drive you to it just so far just yet. And then I don't know what else is down the pipeline. I know they've announced it, but I don't really pay attention to all that shit that much. But that'll do it for us here at the Outpost in today's adventure. So until next time, adventure on.